Probably the best feedback that I've ever received was from my mum.
If you know you have to go into a difficult conversation with someone or you have to deliver something bad, like no one's buzzing for that conversation.
We had an annual review and my feedback was given to me in the form of a spreadsheet.
Say when delivering that feedback, a bad way to do it is that it's transactional. Like you can have a conversation with someone.
Not really.
Are you okay?
Really shocked. What happened? We're about halfway through the podcast, so I thought I'd get some feedback from you. How am I doing? Hello, I'm Chris Lissaman and welcome to Sparks, a series by Interactive Workshops. In every episode, we spark something in work and life, from how to spark onboarding to how to spark sales to how to spark another two excellent guests on the podcast today. I'm delighted to be joined once again by George Dickinson and for your debut, Millie Gladstone on the podcast. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Thank you very much.
How are you feeling about? Yeah, how are you feeling about being back, George? First of all,
Yeah, it's good to be back. Glad to be asked back because when someone says, "Oh yeah, it was great," and then you don't get asked back, it's like, okay, maybe it wasn't so great. So yeah, it's like the affirmation of the first one went well. So that's the one I'm taking. So yes, it feels good to be back.
Definitely. And Millie, you're stepping up to the podcast. How are you feeling?
Very excited. Can't believe I've not been asked yet.
I know.
To be honest, but...
To be honest, we've been waiting a long time to have you on the podcast. So delighted to be with you. We're going to have a bit of a chat about continuous feedback on this one. It's a topic both of you know well and run workshops on. So we're going to start with what is feedback to you? Because we could define it in all sorts of ways. What is it to you? Start with you, George.
Feedback to me, it's such a powerful growth tool. Like, when we share feedback, no matter how big or how small it is, no matter how many people are in the room, no matter what you share, it will raise the learning collective of the room. So I always feel if you're in a room with a few people and someone says, "Oh, I might have like a silly question or something," or you might want to ask something, or is that the right thing to say to someone at that time? It's good feedback, I think. And whenever you give that to someone, it is a gift, right? Feedback is a gift, but it's just a really great and powerful tool to grow. And it also grows everyone who hears it as a learning collective as well. So that's what it means to me.
So for you, it's quite a collective thing. It's not just a kind of one-to-one thing.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of it. It can be one-to-one and it's great for that one specific person. It's great for the person receiving feedback. It's also quite empowering for the person giving feedback because giving feedback can be very difficult, as we know as well. So it goes both ways there. But if you were giving me feedback, Chris, and people were just listening in, for example, in the kitchen or just in this room or whatever, it's really good for them to also hear that too because it just raises their learning experience and collective, even if they're not involved in that. It's something that maybe they've thought, "Oh, that's actually really good to know," or that might actually apply to me. So it can, I think it affects everyone in a positive way as long as obviously it's done the right way.
Yeah, fantastic. And Millie, what about you?
Probably quite similar to George, actually. Stole my line. Feedback is a gift, which took me a bit of time to learn, actually, which maybe we'll talk about a bit later. But it definitely is a gift, like George says, to help people grow. And I think we also need to remember that feedback is a conversation because I think sometimes, if you're giving feedback, we might fall into that trap of kind of saying what needs to be changed, maybe not giving the why behind it. Maybe there's not that much room for discussion because we just think, it's a small, simple change, like just get on and do it. So making sure that actually it is a dialogue and both people are involved and things can be talked about openly is really important to remember as well for me.
Yeah, I really like that. So it's done in kind of community and that raises our learning collectively. And also it's a conversation. So it's a back and forth. So I like those two different angles on that. And we are going to talk about continuous feedback in this one. Why differentiate that from any other kind of feedback? What does that mean?
I mean, I don't think we should differentiate it, actually. For me, feedback inherently should be constant.
Yeah.
So yeah, I actually wouldn't differentiate that. As a small anecdote, which I'll share, actually happened in my previous role before joining IW. And it was a bit of a learning experience for my manager at the time as well, I think. But we had an annual review and my feedback was given to me in the form of a spreadsheet, and every bit of feedback was itemized. And of course, that's not the best way to receive feedback, which I shared, but also it means that I missed out because it wasn't continuous and the feedback wasn't given near to the time where, that mistake or whatever I did that was undesirable behavior happened. Means probably somewhere along the way I've repeated that mistake or that undesirable behavior. So because that feedback wasn't continuous, I missed out on the chance to actually improve myself, because it was, kind of all just given in one annual review meeting. So I gave feedback on my feedback meta.
Not via a spreadsheet?
No, not via a spreadsheet, but just said, it would have been much probably quicker and simpler to have just grabbed me for 5 minutes after that event had happened. And because also I want to know that feedback, I want to grow. So saving it all. And most of it I can remember anyway, because it was, last April or whatever. So
and buried in cell C42 of the spreadsheet, exactly. I imagine. It's like the opposite of a conversation, actually, a spreadsheet, isn't it?
Yes.
It's like the worst you could get on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah. So that was a good learning experience for me and my manager, which is why I'll talk about it, because he learned as well. And he was grateful for the feedback.
Yeah. You can kind of see it in good intent. It's like, I'll document it all, I'll make sure it's all there.
Exactly, yeah.
All written down, but not the best way to deliver it. And George, what's the best feedback you've ever received? You got any stories?
Oh, yeah. I was racking my brains about this beforehand and thinking about what I could share. There's loads of advice that I've maybe been given or I've heard, but feedback is very specific. So there was a really good piece of feedback that I had when I used to work in sales. I had a sales manager who was quite hard, quite fast and quite tough. And it was one of those sales environments where if you don't hit your numbers month one, warning, you don't hit your numbers not month two, you get kindly asked to look for a new job, and then you don't come back at the third month. Basically, it's like a revolving door where I worked. But I had this new sales manager that came in, and I was so obsessed with these numbers because I was always a little bit down on mine, being quite young and inexperienced in that sector at that time. And he pulled me aside and he said, "You're so obsessed with the numbers, like you can't see the wood for your trees. You can't see what actually really matters, and that's the customer sitting in front of you and the value that you need to bring to that customer, because otherwise I've just turned that selling experience into just a series of numbers that I needed to hit, and I've completely forgotten about that human connection that might need to be made when selling something to someone." So it was a really good piece of advice just to like take a step back, and I've kind of taken that a bit forward when into new roles where I've been getting a little bit sort of bogged down in the weeds and a little bit, you've got the blinders on and you don't really know exactly maybe where to go. Like take that step back. What is actually really important here? What is at the heart of what you're doing? And especially in learning development, it's always the people, right? So like, what's the with them? Like, what's in it for me? What they want out of this process rather than you putting those blinders on? So that was probably one of the most powerful pieces of feedback I've got, which I've tried to iterate and just keep in my toolbox to keep thinking back to, because when things get tough, you can just go straight to that, can't you?
Yeah, useful to recall. And what about for you, Millie? Any good examples, or maybe not so good examples? You've already shared one.
Yeah. Probably the best feedback that I've ever received was from my mum, who works in HR, so she's often the person that has to give feedback to people. But I remember it really vividly. We were in the car going to Tesco's or something, and I was complaining about something that happened at work. And basically it was that I'd been given feedback at work. And I mentioned earlier, historically, I've been terrible at receiving feedback. And that's exactly what my mum pointed out to me. She said, you're not that good at receiving feedback. Obviously, immediately went on the defense. What are you talking about? Of course I am. I'm perfect. And then after that was actually a real eye-opener over the next days, weeks, months. I was like, I actually am really bad at receiving feedback. So it's something that I definitely had to work on. And now that's why I'm so up for, receiving, giving, anything to do with feedback, because I was so bad and just naturally went on the defensive because I thought feedback was a criticism. Right. I didn't see it as that growth opportunity. So that was definitely the best feedback.
Oh, that's good. That's like a switch that's flipped, and now you're keen to receive and improve the way you receive it. That's good. I thought rather than talk about the all the benefits of feedback, which have been done to death, we could ask AI, but I thought we'd play a game. And we'll go around, we'll have a bit of a lightning round, and we'll each share a benefit of feedback. Could be anything. Short and sweet, though. And then we'll go around until we run out. Okay? George, you want to start us off?
I'm just going to say what I said earlier.
Growth tool. Growth tool, okay. Building skills.
Building stronger relationships.
Transparency.
Avoiding pitfalls.
Helps us embrace vulnerability.
Raising the collective learning of the group.
Okay. Putting us in a position for promotion.
Guess I lose.
I
Put you on the
cheated.
spot.
I think I just went to everything I've just said so far and just like churned that out.
Yeah. You were just repeating what you said before. It would put you on the spot, yeah. It's hard to distill them down into a few words, though, I think.
Yeah.
Because like you've described, feedback can be a kind of community benefit that has this impact. People can overhear something and that helps. It's conversational. So we learn not just from the feedback, but the way it's given. So there's lots that we can gain from it that we can't summarize easily. Well done on the lightning round. I want to share something that, apart from you, Millie, I want to share something that we use this in a lot of workshops because it's a good study that Zenger and Folkman did about the fact that we actually do want feedback more than we think. The general consensus might be that people don't really want negative feedback, constructive feedback. They do want positive feedback, and so that's why we avoid it. But that's not strictly true, is it?
Yeah. I think we are. I can't speak for everyone. I know here we have this real culture of giving and receiving feedback. Like it's even in our assessments, like how good are you at giving and receiving feedback? It's such an important skill, especially when we're cross collaborating with so many people, internal, external stakeholders. Communication has to be really clear at all times, and that involves a lot of feedback. So I think. A lot of the people that work here, maybe we're in this like lovely little bubble. We love getting feedback. I think it's the giving feedback that can be very difficult for some people. Yeah.
What do you think, Millie?
I'd almost say sometimes the opposite, George. Controversial. I think that because we have that perception that we're really open and really great at giving feedback, sometimes we go in either too softly. So we have like Friday shout outs and kind of, want to make sure everyone feels positive and like they're doing a great job. I've also had it where I've gone too far the other way. And because of my kind of realization of how great feedback is, I had no problem going in, being really direct and kind of giving, critical feedback. And with the studies say people crave it, but actually you need that balance because otherwise people feel like they've been a bit attacked. Yeah. Even for me, I'm like, okay, I'm just assessing this bit of work. Boom, boom, boom. Here's your feedback. It needs to be a bit softer sometimes, which is another lesson I've learned in my feedback journey. Over the years.
It's true, isn't it? That people want it a lot more actually than positive feedback, but they don't want a lot more negative feedback than positive feedback.
Yes.
It's probably the way to describe it.
Yeah.
And I think it's when it's well delivered, isn't it, that we really want it. And that's where actually we'd rather choose not to have feedback if it's not well delivered.
And that's where the difference is, I think. Like the study says, of course, we all want that constructive feedback because we all want to grow and be good at our jobs. But it definitely depends on the way that feedback is delivered as well. And there's a good way and a bad way to deliver it. So that makes a big impact.
What would be a really bad way of delivering feedback?
Spreadsheet.
Apart from a spreadsheet. Perhaps in a conversation. So you're going down the route that you've described. It's a conversation. You're sitting down with someone. You've made the time, you've booked the room, all that kind of stuff. You've got kind of what you want to say. It's not in a spreadsheet, but you've got some notes of some kind. What would then be a bad way of delivering that?
I think if we don't focus on the behaviour that we want to see changed enough, I think where sometimes we fall down, or where I've definitely fallen down in the past, is that it might seem like it's feedback on the person personally as an individual. And of course it's not. It's on, on the behaviour that needs to be changed. So making sure that we've got in mind, okay, what was that behaviour and the impact and what actually needs to change with some guidance for that as well. Because we also have situations sometimes where we might be told that wasn't the right thing to do, or, that behaviour needs to be changed, but then we don't actually get told how or what the future behaviour should be. So making sure we really focus on that and make sure it's really clear of what needs to change and how. It's really important. Yeah,
that's a really good point. And I'd also say when delivering that feedback, a bad way to do it is that it's transactional. Like you can have a conversation with someone with feedback. If it's just transactional one way, okay, you did this, you did that, that wasn't good, that's not how we do things here. It not only feels like a personal attack, but the way you're going about it as well, it's like compounding these feedback, almost errors on top of each other and making the other person feel I'm literally just sitting here getting attacked, or you're just telling me all the things that were wrong and you're not telling me why or what the behaviors might need to be. So definitely the personal attack, but also the way that you deliver that. If it's not that conversational, and it may even start with something like, instead of, okay, you've done this wrong, like, what did you think about that piece of work that you did? Or like, if you were to do that again, maybe what would you change? Giving them that opportunity. I'm a coach, and I've gone this bit of coaching journey for the last few years, and I work a lot with sort of graduates taking the first steps in their careers. And a lot of the things that come from like a coaching lens is not telling somebody what to do. Like, someone might come in with a problem or an issue. If you tell them what to do, what you think you should do, or advice, it's not going to be very impactful at all. But getting that out of someone, asking really open, impactful questions and revealing questions, getting them to come to that self-realization is so much more powerful, because they're much more likely to incite action after that, rather than you just telling, if I say, Chris, that was the wrong way to do something, you might say, okay, great, and you might change it. But if I worked with you to make you realize what you did, and that came from you saying, oh, I actually did that, that's going to be much more impactful, and that's going to stay as a bit more of a lasting memory for something that you're more likely to change. So it's almost trying to maybe flip the script sometimes and getting them to come out with the answer, not just being transactional, like boom, 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 you've done this, and this, and they're just compounds on top of each other.
I think that those questions really help. And it's difficult to do, I think, because you can ask questions and it feels like you're beating around the bush, and the other person is like, I don't know, what should I feel about that? Just tell me. It feels like you've got something kind of on your chest. But I remember a good example of someone giving me constructive feedback where they did ask the questions and they did sort of talk me through it. Basically, a confession time. I'd sent an email to a client, early days of dealing with clients. I'd sent an email, and basically it was a busy season, and I'd given them basically the first slot in my diary, but it was in like a couple of weeks. And I'd been brought into this project to help and kind of deliver something fairly quickly. But then I'd gone back to them via an email and said, yeah, you can have a slot, but it's in 2 weeks. And so the feedback was, that's not the best way to kind of show that we're going to deliver something really quickly. In fact, someone else on the team probably could have stepped in and had a meeting tomorrow. So if I thought about it properly, I could have done things differently. But my manager at the time sat me down and said, sort of, what do you think their perception is of us now that we've said that? And so it just helped me work it out bit by bit, what I'd done wrong. And I think you're right, it's a much more powerful way to learn what you've done. And I remember that piece of feedback, that was years ago. So it really sticks.
Yeah, I think we also have to be really careful about the attribution bias that we have towards things as well. Just because someone has done something wrong or done something in the wrong way, or have sent an email and that's been perceived wrong, it doesn't mean that their intentions were negative all the time. Like, they might have a positive intention. You might have been really busy when you sent that email. It might have been a few seconds. You might say, oh, I've got this and this next week. No, I can't send. Absolutely fine. Like, from your side, you'd probably think, oh, maybe I didn't do anything wrong, but how that might have been perceived. And the person on the end of that might have thought, oh, that person's just like blowing me off maybe. But actually being aware of our bias towards that as well, I think is really key as well. Because like I said, that person on the other end of it, how they're going to perceive that. Like my manager said, the customer in front of you, how are they going to perceive the way that you're coming into that conversation? It's something we need to be really aware of. So I think self-awareness is really key when it comes to feedback as well.
Really important. We're about halfway through the podcast, so I thought I'd get some feedback from you. How am I doing?
Great.
Yeah, really good.
What am I doing well? Anything I can improve?
You're making it really easy to chat, because it does just feel like we're having a conversation. Blaring lights and microphones aside, we could actually just be like chatting over lunch or something, couldn't we? It's great.
Great, that's the idea.
Yeah, definitely. Not to say exactly what Millie said, but like setting the tone really well for a good relaxing environment really helps sort of settle the guests again. And it sort of, the way that you start with the way that went, so you came in like absolutely buzzing, like jumping around, we're probably feeling starting to do that as well. And if you came in being a little bit glum or something, or you had a bad journey in or something like that, that would reflect across as well. So setting the tone as sort of the leader of the podcast has definitely helped make me feel welcome.
Helpful feedback. And what can I improve for the second half of our podcast?
I've never been on one of these before, and I probably wasn't given much of a brief. Just shown up and sat here and started talking. So maybe for next time,
yeah,
maybe we could have a bit of a chat about what I should do and what to expect as well.
so you can get better prepared in
Yes.
advance. I'll
Yeah.
send you that in a spreadsheet.
Thank you.
And George?
No more lightning rounds. That was stress. That was
That was too stressful
That was
for you.
anxiety inducing for me.
Good feedback. Okay, maybe we won't do that next time. Thank you both for your feedback. Appreciate it. Why is it we struggle with feedback? You quite maybe more easily gave the positive feedback there. The constructive was maybe a bit painful. Initially, you just wanted to say, yeah, great, let's move on. Why is it that we find it that little bit painful?
To give feedback.
Yeah, of any kind, really, but particularly that constructive feedback.
I think it's honestly, it's human nature. Like, we want to be nice. Like, it's not nice sitting, if you know you have to go into a difficult conversation with someone or you have to deliver something bad, like, no one's buzzing for that conversation. Like, no one's getting really amped up for that. It is a very difficult thing that you might have to do. And handling that in the proper way is really, really delicate, and it's an art, really. Otherwise, it may feel like that other person is being attacked or whatever it might be. So I think just naturally we just have this knee-jerk reaction to, I don't want to give this feedback because it's just it maybe disrupt a relationship I have. I like this person, or, we're friends, or whatever it might be. But it's not personal, as you said. Like, take it professionally, don't take it personally. Unless they really start getting nasty and personal, obviously, then that's another question. That's when HR gets brought into it. But it's a conversation that has to happen for that growth. So understanding your role there, and as a leader as well, you have to give feedback continuously and have to give difficult feedback, and it's the price you pay of being a leader, but you have to do it in the right way. So I think just that knee-jerk reaction that we have, it's just human nature, but we need to overcome that and look at what are the positive intentions behind it and what are the positive things this person's going to get out of it, because they will ultimately be positive.
Over to me, sorry.
That's okay.
So insightful, George. I think similar. I think we naturally want to be empathetic. So for me, I worry about how the other person might perceive what I'm saying. I have no issue not criticising. God, this. Why have you got me on here?
But you have no issue criticising.
Should we speak to your mum? Should we get your mum?
Sarah, for giving me that. I've got no problem giving constructive feedback when it's on maybe a piece of work that someone's delivered, because we kind of do that every day. We're so used to it. But if it's something that's a bit bigger, like you say, if it's that weightier conversation, you do get a little bit worried about how the other person's going to perceive it. So having that empathy is key, but also, it's a bit frightening sometimes, isn't it? Because you never know how that other person's going to react. You could have a great relationship, and often actually when you go into those situations and you give that feedback, 99% of the times I've been worried about giving feedback. Maybe it's someone, higher up than me or something like that. But they are also a human at the other end. So usually it works out fine, and they're grateful for the feedback if you do it tactfully. So I think that's the other thing to remember as well, or that I try and remember if I'm feeling a bit nervous about a conversation, is that, when has it ever actually gone wrong? People, as we know from the study, are grateful to receive that constructive feedback usually. Yeah,
and there aren't many people, I think, that we would think, they've got bad intentions. Most of us go into a conversation with our manager, with our colleagues, knowing that they've got good intentions, knowing that they're trying their best to deliver it in a good way. And I think maybe we overemphasize that kind of, when we look at ourselves, we think they're going to think it's a personal attack. They're going to think I've got a problem. They're going to think I've misread the situation or something, when actually most people assume good intentions.
100%. And I think that's why it's so important that feedback is a conversation. Because I think sometimes as well, you do have to not question the feedback that you receive, but also, put your critical thinking hat on, in the same way that you don't read a newspaper article and just assume everything in there is fact. It might be that you've got a better relationship with that client, or you've been working on that project for a bit longer. And, most of the time, a fresh pair of eyes giving that feedback is going to be fantastic and, help the project. But actually, if there is a bit of your expertise that you can leverage and say, actually, I did that because of this, and you can have that back and forth and actually collaborate a little bit and probably create maybe a change or a solution that's, you know, better than the two of you even thought. So keeping that mindset that it is a conversation, it's not you going in, you know, to tell someone off, or you're not about to be told off as well, can be helpful.
Yeah, that negative intention thing is really interesting as well. Someone actually said to me recently that it's like the white cat theory. Like no one is sitting in their ivory tower like Dr. Evil stroking their white cat thinking, how am I going to personally attack Millie with this feedback and ruin her day? Like I said, that person giving feedback, it's probably just as hard for them to give feedback as it is for maybe you to receive it. So if you're on the receiving end of some critical feedback or some constructive feedback, or even if it is just some negative feedback that just needs to be addressed in a quite delicate way, instead of, you know, having that feeling that you're being personally attacked, understanding that that person is also trying to bring it about in the right way, and it goes both ways. So yeah, it can be the negative intentions we have to kind of let go of a little bit and think about what is the greater good of this conversation. It is, you're telling me something that I can improve in, or I can get better in, and I need to be sort of grateful and learning that. And we can ask questions, we can talk about it, but yeah, it's being really careful about the negative intentions that are attached, because a lot of the time, like I said, they're not there. It's a human giving a human a piece of feedback and talking.
I think we also don't ever give feedback on how we've been given feedback.
Getting meta now.
Yeah, not to get too
Dream within a dream.
into the multiverse. But, you know, because it is one of those things that we maybe can be a bit nervous about, it is helpful sometimes if someone actually has delivered feedback in a really good way, that, you know, maybe it was constructive, but you know it really helped you and it was delivered in a good way. Actually saying, you know, thanks for that feedback, that was delivered really well, goes such a long way too. Because again, if you're that person feeling a bit anxious delivering that feedback, even though you've got the good intention, if no one ever actually confirms or affirms
so true.
that you gave that feedback well, of course you're going to be nervous the next time you have to give some slightly constructive or negative feedback.
So maybe the next time we get some feedback, we can affirm that person that they delivered it well. It's true. I've never said that to anyone. I've thanked people for feedback, but I've never said that was really well delivered. Thank you for making sure that was well delivered. So I think a really important thing. Millie, you mentioned giving clients feedback. Should we be careful about that? Should we treat it differently, or should we treat that the same as any feedback?
That's a great question, Chris. I guess it comes down to the relationship that you have. We naturally find it easier, or I certainly do, to give feedback to our colleagues because, you know, you're collaborating and working together every day. So you've got a good sense of maybe how they like to be communicated with. And that can be the case for long-standing clients as well. But maybe if it's a new relationship or somebody really senior on the client side, like with anything, you have to be delicate. I'd say it's probably rare that we give feedback to clients. It's probably more coming under sort of project management. You know, if there's something that needs to be reviewed by a client and they haven't, it's how do you have that conversation? But I think just being polite but firm is usually the route that I would take. And because we're quite flexible, it's, you know, rarely ever a problem, but, you know, just reminding them of the timelines we have, what we need to get done before, you know, they need that project delivered or whatever it might be. So maybe approaching it slightly more carefully if they're a newer client. But at the end of the day, you know, they're still a person. We're still going to try and do all the good feedback things that we do when we're giving feedback to someone internally as we would be externally.
That question's actually sparked something for me. Oh, I know, big reveal. So I've been working with a lot of New York-based clients recently, and just last night I was on a workshop at a silly hour with someone, and we delivered the workshop together, and it was myself from Interactive Workshops and him from another company delivering to 40 or 50 of their managers. And straight after the workshop,
Sorry.
One for the outtakes.
Really?
are you okay?
Really shot. What happened?
It's fell out my pocket, I think.
Oh, and
Sorry,
it yanked it down.
It's okay.
So
You
carry on.
look really short. Are you all right?
It's like you're
Okay,
shot.
good. Yeah.
Oh God.
So I've been working with quite a few American-based clients recently, mainly in New York, and I was on a workshop last night with a client, and it was myself and him, and he works for a talent acquisition. So it's me and him, and we're dual facilitating. And straight after the workshop, he says, "George, how was that? How did I do? How can I get better?" He was actively, and he always does this. Every time I've spoken to him after every call, even if it's just a meeting that we have about like a planning something, he's asking for feedback straight away. And it kind of got me thinking about the different stakeholders that we have and different clients that we have across the world and the different cultures that come into play. He obviously is very open and works in a very open sort of culture with his team, and is always insightful of that. Whereas you might work with another client maybe over in Europe, and you might not have that dialogue, or that person who doesn't actively jump out and say, "How did I do? What's my feedback?" So adapting to the needs of different people. And how maybe the culture in one company or in one team might be very different in opening and receiving feedback, and how maybe they do that. It can be really important to be self-aware as well. Like I said, here we have a very rich feedback culture, and we have a framework behind it as well. Other companies might just not have that at all. So when you might have to deliver feedback to them, they might feel like not maybe a little bit personally attacked, but they might feel a little bit taken aback because they don't really have that much. So it's really important to me to understand like the nuances of the different cultures as well with the people that you have to deal with. But that was something that sparked for me.
Yeah, I also had a client once ask me, "Okay, give me some feedback, just straight off the bat. Give me one thing I'm doing well. Give me one thing I can improve." And so I recommend having that in your back pocket.
Yeah, it really catches you off guard, though.
Yeah.
It really caught me off guard. It's something that I feel like we should have had a conversation about. And afterwards, I was like, yeah, I should have just brought that up anyway. But when he asked me, I was like, whoa, okay, we're going like straight into feedback. But that's something that I probably should have been a bit more self-aware of. But by him jumping in, it really helped make that conversation really easy. And then we had a really good 15-minute conversation around that. And we talked about some things that maybe might not have come up so naturally if he hadn't have taken that first step.
And he's clearly someone who's made it habit that after every kind of meeting or workshop or whatever it is,
absolutely,
give me a little bit of feedback.
Yeah.
We actually haven't talked about asking for feedback that much. We've mainly talked about how we give feedback.
Yeah.
And I think that's almost like the missing piece of the puzzle sometimes, right? I think we get so used to, I guess in our careers as we progress, we get more used to giving feedback because you develop that expertise or that niche or that knowledge, and you're helping people coming in. So we go from, in the beginning of our career, often receiving a lot of feedback quite naturally, and then it tapers off again naturally. But I think many of us don't actually recognize or make the time to ask for that feedback all the time. So taking that as a first step and helping encourage that feedback culture is key.
Yeah, and people are very busy. If you don't ask them for feedback on something, it's again not the white cat. They're not going to withhold feedback because they don't want to give you feedback. They probably just have forgotten, or they just feel like they don't have time. So it feels the wrong thing to say you have to chase people up for feedback, but it is a really good way of personal development as well. Always asking for feedback. It's coming towards the end of the year. It's coming to annual review time in a lot of people in a lot of companies. We have this great 360 assessment tool that gets feedback from people around the company, and then you review it with your manager. It's all these sorts of things that are really good time of year to start doing, but learning that it is continuous as well, and we have to keep asking for feedback if we really want it.
And you touched on having a framework for feedback a bit earlier. Got a good framework for feedback to have in the back pocket?
I'm going to steal the one that we use here all the time, and it's what went well, even better if. Classic framework. Works every time, and I think it's a nice way of going about it as well. Getting both sides of that coin, I think, yeah.
I'd say as well, because we do use that one a lot internally, it actually enables us to have feedback conversations really easily because no one's surprised by, the even better if section, which, they might be if, you didn't have that kind of strong framework in place. But it just makes it really easy. One framework that I'm a fan of is the super catchy SBID. I said earlier that I'm obsessed with thinking about behaviours when it comes to giving feedback. So SBID stands for situation, setting that context a little bit, maybe what happened. The B is then the behaviour that we need to see the change in. The I stands for the impact, so sharing the impact that behaviour had that was maybe positive if we're giving good feedback, or negative if it is constructive feedback. And then D is the desired behaviour that we want to see, so that future focus at the end.
That's nice. And that wraps up in a way that's future focused. Even better if is also future focused. It's thinking about next time, which is really helpful in delivering that feedback. We're coming towards the end of the podcast. George, tell us a little bit more about how we're helping organizations build feedback culture.
Yeah, I'm actually working on a really interesting project at the moment with one of our biggest clients in the aviation industry. In their defense and space sort of sector or arm of their company, we're putting on, over the next 6 months, we're sitting down with all 1,200 of their managers up to sort of middle managers up to their XCOM. And we're delivering a leadership and culture workshop on how to identify these 4 behaviors: discipline, collaboration, transparency, and ownership. And how each person needs to embody these behaviors a little bit more. I might throw SPID in there next time, actually.
Nice.
How we can use that, because to change the culture, or to change the leadership of an organization, we really need a behavioral change. And it's a really great in-depth coaching workshop that goes into these behaviors, and it's all around sort of having those difficult conversations, especially with yourself as well. What do I need to change? Because it can be very difficult as a leader, understanding maybe what do I need to get better in, rather than playing the blame game. So that's something that I'm doing at the moment over the next sort of 6 months, which is a really fascinating workshop and an opportunity to be involved in.
Very exciting. That's all for this one. If you've liked this episode, do give it a like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. George, Millie, thank you for joining me on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.